You're not being evicted. Margaret, your presence is just too loud for what we're building here. I stared at her, barefoot in my hallway, holding my cup of morning tea, watching movers carry out the last of my bedroom furniture. She sipped her green juice casually, wireless mic already clipped to her collar, her oversized headphones slung around her neck like a prize she hadn't earned. She leaned toward me, not with anger, but with a rehearsed empathy, the kind that condescends as it suffocates, and whispered, "We're rebranding this space into something calmer. Something with purpose. You've had your time. Let me stop right there. If you've ever been treated like a relic in your own home, keep watching until the end. And if you've seen anything like this in your neighborhood, tell me the name of your city in the comments below. I want to know how far this epidemic spreads. And if you're someone who still believes older women deserve respect, tap that subscribe button now. You may be the only voice we have left. They didn't ask. They didn't suggest. They converted my master bedroom, the room where my husband and I built 42 years of love, where I wrote his last birthday card, where I watched my grandson take his first wobbly steps into a soundproofed podcast studio. The walls once held framed photos of our family, lace-curtained windows opening to the maple tree we planted when we bought this house in '85, now foamed panels, LED ring lights, a recording do not enter sign bolted to the door. She called it The Quiet Shift. It was the name of her new podcast, a healing space for women who need to unlearn generational noise. And apparently, I was the noise. My son, David, stood behind her that day, not saying a word, just scrolling his phone, as if silence was the only contribution he could make to his wife's brand. And that silence was worse than any insult. I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because somehow, in that moment, I wasn't sure if I even belonged here anymore. Let me back up. My name is Margaret Calloway. I am 71 years old. I have 2 knees that need replacing, a brain that still works just fine, and a house I've paid off since the Clinton administration. This house was in my name until 2 years ago, when I transferred it into a family trust for tax purposes. I did it on the advice of a lawyer I now suspect was also her yoga instructor. But more than a home, this was my last sacred space. And now, I stood watching them install sound-dampening carpets over the wood my husband refinished by hand. It all started when my daughter-in-law, Celine, moved in temporarily while pregnant with my grandson, Noah. She had a difficult pregnancy. And of course, I welcomed her. I even moved into the guest room to make her comfortable. Back then, she was soft-spoken, kind. She'd ask me about my recipes, laugh when I showed her David's baby photos, even thank me after every meal. But everything changed once she gave birth, not all at once, but like a tide turning so slowly, you don't notice the sand disappearing beneath your feet. First, she started filming in the living room. Then the dining room became a set. Then she hung blackout curtains in the kitchen for visual consistency. I didn't mind I even helped with wardrobe when her assistant cancelled. But every week, I felt more like a prop than a person. She had talking points, episode outlines, brand deals, guest interviews, but never once did she ask me to join. Not until she launched her season 2, the rebrand. That's when she said my essence didn't align with her message. My essence. What was I, a candle? I tried talking to David, but every time I brought it up, he said I was overthinking it, that Celine was expressing herself. I'm sorry, he told me once, barely glancing up from his laptop. But can you just let her build something? You had your family. Mum. Let her have this. Let her have this. Had I become a piece of furniture in my own life? And then came the moment I knew I was being erased. One morning, I woke up to find my name gone from the mailbox. Just the Calloway studio. No Margaret. No Mrs. Just Brand. She invited a group of influencers over for a soft launch. They toasted with oat milk lattes and gluten-free cupcakes. She introduced the new space as the womb where powerful ideas are born. I was standing in the hallway, listening, when I heard one of them ask, "And who's the lady in the guest room?" Selene laughed. "Just legacy," she said. Legacy. That was the word she used to explain me. I remember sitting on the porch that night, trying to understand how this had all happened. I thought about the years I spent folding David's laundry, taking him to piano practice, helping him through his divorce before Celine. I thought about the nights I stayed awake during storms just to make sure the basement didn't flood. And now, I needed permission to walk past a red blinking light on my own bedroom door. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was empty, hollowed out, like an abandoned guest at my own family's table. But something shifted the night I heard her say it. She was recording with a guest, a therapist, or maybe a brand consultant. I don't know. I was walking by the door when the mic picked up her voice, loud and clear. I needed to neutralize her. That energy, it's like static. You can't grow with static. You need silence. I froze. She was talking about me. Neutralize. Silence. Static. That night, I sat in the dark guest room with my phone in hand. I opened the voice memos app, and I pressed record. That recording changed everything. It wasn't just her voice. It was the certainty in it. Like she truly believed I was nothing more than an inconvenient hum in the background of her masterpiece. The next morning, I noticed something strange. The kitchen calendar where I'd always marked birthdays, doctor appointments, and our Sunday dinners had been wiped clean. In its place was a whiteboard titled Content Schedule. My son's handwriting was nowhere. It was all hers. And on that schedule, Sunday dinner had been replaced by live stream emotional boundaries with parents. I stood there in my robe, holding my coffee, staring at the erasure. That calendar wasn't just about dates. It was memory, legacy, a way of keeping our family rhythm intact. Erasing it felt like pulling a thread loose from a carefully knitted blanket and watching it all unravel. Later that day, I opened the hallway closet to grab my slippers, but the slippers were gone. In their place were boxes of podcast merchandise mugs that read, "Break the Lineage," and tote bags stamped with "Silence is a form of healing." I opened one of the boxes, and there it was, a t-shirt with Selene's signature quote from her latest episode. Sometimes the strongest boundary is a locked door. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for anymore. My belongings, my past, or just some evidence that I wasn't imagining it all that evening. I went searching for a quilt my grandmother made stitched by hand in 1947. I always kept it folded neatly in the linen chest. But it wasn't there. I asked Selene if she'd seen it. She barely looked up from her tablet. "Oh, I think we donated a bunch of the old stuff last week. It was clogging up the vibe. Old stuff. Not items. Not memories. Just clutter." And that was the moment it clicked. She wasn't trying to live with me. She was trying to live without me inside the same house. I wasn't part of the story anymore. I was the noise she wanted to edit out. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't confront. I did something I hadn't done in decades. I started documenting every strange change. Every missing item, every person coming in and out of the garage entrance late at night. I even noticed a small black object tucked inside the potted plant outside my guest room door, a tiny camera lens. Barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. That night, Celine recorded another episode. Her voice carried through the thin wall between my guest bed and the hallway. "You can't grow in the presence of outdated influence," she said calmly. "You must create clean spaces physically, emotionally, spiritually. That means letting go of guilt, even when guilt lives down the hall." She wasn't podcasting anymore. She was issuing a manifesto the next morning. Something else was off. I went to refill my blood pressure medication, and the label had changed. It was still my name, but the instructions were different. Confused. I called the pharmacy. They told me no changes had been made in their system. But someone had picked it up 2 days earlier, not me. I brought the bottle to David. "Does this look different to you?" He barely looked. "You probably just misplaced the old one. You've been under stress lately." "Mom." It was the way he said it that stung. Soft, patient, dismissive. The way people speak to someone they've quietly decided no longer knows what's real. That afternoon, I walked to the library. I didn't trust my computer at home anymore. I created a new email address. I began sending myself daily logs, every odd comment, every disappearing item, every unexplained invoice. I labeled the folder just in case. Some of you watching might think I was paranoid, that I was spiraling. But let me ask you something. If little by little, you noticed your life being rearranged, your identity replaced with buzzwords and product launches, would you wait for proof or trust your gut? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to know, at what point would you speak up, or would you stay silent and risk becoming a ghost in your own home, because control doesn't always wear boots. Sometimes it walks barefoot on hardwood floors, whispers softly, and smiles while it erases you. And what I didn't know yet was that the studio wasn't the only room she had plans for. For the next 2 weeks, no one knocked on my door. Not David, not Celine, not even little Noah, who used to wander in just to ask if I had any of the crunchy grapes he liked from my fridge drawer. I would wake up early, as always, open the blinds in the guest room, and sit on the corner of the bed in silence, listening for footsteps that never came. The house was full of soundproof walls and noise-cancelling earbuds now. Conversations happened behind screens, behind cameras, behind passwords I didn't know. It wasn't just that I'd been moved out of my bedroom. I was being moved out of their lives. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe Selene had interviews. Maybe David was buried in work. But then I noticed the small things. I went to the kitchen to make my tea, only to find the mugs I always used, the ceramic blue ones with floral rims, gone, replaced by sleek matte black tumblers labelled TMS in tiny silver font. The pantry had been reorganized. No more soup cans, no more English breakfast. Everything was labelled by colour and aesthetic. Rows of chia seeds, herbal blends, focus tonics. Nothing I recognised. Nothing for me. Then came the freezer. My chicken soup, the one I made in batches for cold nights, was gone. My name on the container had been crossed out in marker. A single word written in its place, expired. I began to question everything. Was I becoming forgetful? Had I moved it myself? Or was I truly being eliminated one spoon, one tea bag, one memory at a time? But the worst part, the deepest cut, was Noah. He used to come to me with every bump, every scraped knee, every crayon masterpiece. We used to read stories in my old rocking chair, the one that now lived in the garage beneath folded yoga mats. But one day, I saw him walk past my door, hesitate, and then keep going. He was holding a tablet, listening to his mother's voice. "You don't have to carry anyone else's history," she was saying in that soft, rehearsed voice of hers. "Even if they live with you, even if they love you." The next day, I asked if I could pick him up from preschool. Celine said no. "We're practicing secure attachment. We can't have too many caretakers interrupting the flow." Too many caretakers. I wasn't a stranger. I was his grandmother. Or had I been demoted without notice? Even my own friends started to fade away. Janice stopped calling after 2 unanswered messages I never saw. Claudia came by once, but said Celine told her I was napping and not to be disturbed. I was never napping. I was sitting 5 feet away, reading. They were managing my availability like I was a hotel room. So I tested it. I left the house for a day, no note, no call. I went to the senior centre. I played a round of bridge. I even had a scone I didn't pay for. Someone had seen the look on my face and just handed it to me. When I came home, no one noticed I was gone. There was no text, no knock. Nothing. I was invisible. I thought, maybe I should confront David. Have a real talk. But when I did, he looked at me like I was pulling him away from something important. "Mum," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I think you're overwhelmed. Just relax a little. Okay? Relax." I had been gaslit into silence. A smiley, mindful, cruelty-free kind of silence. One night, I sat in my room and pulled out an old photo album. Not the digital kind, the real one, heavy with time, leather-bound, pages cracking from years of being loved. I flipped through photos of birthday parties, 4th of July picnics, my son's graduation. And then I turned to a blank page. And I wondered, is this what it looks like when your life no longer gets printed? Have you ever felt that before? Like you're still alive, still breathing, still reaching out, but somehow everyone around you decided your chapter already ended. If you've lived through that kind of quiet erasure, tell me in the comments. Someone else might need to know they're not the only one. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the hallway camera blink every time I moved, and around 2 a.m. I saw something. A woman I didn't know entered the house through the back door. She was carrying a tote bag with the motherhood matrix printed in bold pink. She walked down the hall and into what used to be the nursery. And that's when I realized they weren't just taking my room, they were replacing the entire story. I don't know what woke me that morning. Maybe it was the cold, maybe it was instinct. But I remember opening my eyes at exactly 4:17 and realizing I was freezing. I got up, wrapped myself in a shawl, and went to check the thermostat. It had been changed, dropped to 60 degrees. My fingers trembled as I pressed the buttons back up. I didn't think much of it until I saw the notification screen blinking. Manual override initiated. Guest room zone. 3:42 a.m. Manual override. Why would someone intentionally lower the temperature only in my room while I was sleeping that afternoon? I called my primary care physician to refill a prescription. The nurse on the line paused when I gave my name. "Oh," she said, "I thought you were transferring to a new facility. Someone called and requested your medical records." I felt the air leave my lungs. Who called? I asked. The nurse didn't know. The request had been made using my full legal name and date of birth, and it was signed by someone claiming to be my medical proxy. I never assigned one. I hung up and stared at the floor, unable to breathe. That evening, Selene floated through the hallway, humming softly. "We're doing a new series," she said, "about intergenerational trauma and how to recognize toxic matriarchal patterns. I might use examples from real life." I said nothing. She tilted her head. "Don't you think you've had enough time in the spotlight?" I went back to my room and opened the just-in-case folder. I scrolled through the logs, the deleted mail, the cameras, the relabeled medications. Now a forged medical transfer, I wasn't just being silenced, I was being removed on paper. But it wasn't until the next day that everything truly shifted. I was walking back from the pharmacy when a woman approached me at the corner. "Excuse me, are you Margaret Calloway?" I hesitated. "Yes." She smiled politely. "I just wanted to say thank you for choosing Vital Sound Studios for your recording equipment. Your daughter-in-law said you were the co-founder. The invoice had your name." "My name," I repeated. "Yes, Margaret Calloway, listed as creative director. We always love seeing elder creators step into the space." I smiled faintly and excused myself. When I got home, I went straight to the trash bin outside the garage. I pulled out the shipping label from the latest delivery, a neon pink box labeled Motherhood Matrix Merch Kit, recipient Margaret Calloway, Creative Director, Home Studio Division. She was using my name. She was forging an image of collaboration while slowly building legal separation. I marched to my son's office. I hadn't been inside for months. He looked up from his screen, startled. "David," I said, "do you know Selene is filing orders under my name, that she requested my medical records, that she's using our home address to register a business?" He blinked. "Wait, what, she's registering this as a home studio?" I said, "Under my name? She's making decisions about me without me." He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Mum, I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. She said she was helping you get organized. She said you wanted to feel more included." Included. That word hit me like a slap. I walked out before I could say anything cruel. I knew it would be wasted anyway. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a rage I hadn't felt in decades. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fiery. It was clear. There's a clarity that comes when you finally see the shape of the trap and realize it was never a misunderstanding. It was design. What would you do if someone used your kindness to sign your name on things you never agreed to? If someone smiled while replacing your voice with theirs? Have you ever been made the face of something you didn't choose? Leave a comment. I want to know how you took your power back. That night, I didn't cry. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Lisa, a retired legal assistant who used to live next door before she moved to Oregon. I told her everything. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Start printing. Every email, every invoice, every label with your name on it." I asked her, "Do you think I'm being paranoid?" She answered without hesitation, "No. Margaret, I think you're being targeted." That night, I didn't sleep. I printed until dawn, because this time, I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I was getting ready. And I had no idea that one of Celine's brand partners would soon call me by mistake and reveal the one document that would change everything. The call came on a Thursday morning. I had just finished printing another round of invoices when my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. "Hi." This is Jenna from Seed House Wellness Collective, the voice said cheerfully. We just wanted to confirm the outline for the upcoming podcast sponsorship with Margaret Calloway's brand, The Motherhood Matrix. Are we still good to run your voiceover for the fall campaign? I froze. My voiceover was we received the file last week. It's a bit scratchy, to be honest. Doesn't sound fully like a studio take, but we assumed that was part of the aesthetic. You know, authentic grandmother energy. I nearly dropped the phone. I asked her to forward the file. She hesitated, said she'd need confirmation from the production team. I gave her my email anyway and hung up. A few hours later, it arrived. The voice was mine, but it was clipped together from old voicemails I'd left for David. Spliced, rearranged, strung into a narrative I had never spoken. It sounded like me endorsing her brand, like I was proud, like I had been part of it all along. I felt sick. Celine had taken my words, fragments of memory, and turned them into marketing copy. That night, I opened the locked box where I kept my husband's things. Inside were cassette tapes, old messages, his voice reading to our son, birthday letters he had once recorded for me. I hadn't touched them in years. But now, I had a new plan. If she wanted to weaponize my words, then I would use my voice on my own terms. The next morning, I bought a new burner phone. I created a second email account. I backed up every file from the just-in-case folder and uploaded it to cloud storage under Lisa's name as a legal failsafe. Then I called the small print shop near the library, the one with the grumpy man who always gave me exact change. He remembered me. He helped me scan documents, notarize my signature, and even bind the files into an accordion folder. I labeled it Active Threats. I wasn't afraid of being dramatic anymore, because one by one, the pieces started falling into place. A copy of an EIN application listing Margaret Calloway as co-creator of a California-based wellness brand. A shipment invoice for 200 branded mugs billed to my Medicare address. A change of address notice redirecting mail from my doctor to Suite A studio office. And then the kicker. A business license renewal request bearing my forged signature. Lisa helped me verify the paperwork. It's sloppy, she said, but unless someone checks, it passes. I knew then that I had enough to go to a lawyer, but something inside me hesitated. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I wanted her to know I had seen her fully. So I waited, I prepared, and I started watching her differently. She was careful, slick. Her episodes were smoother now, more confident. She'd built a rhythm, a following. Every time she passed me in the hall, she smiled with pity, as if I were a child outgrown. But behind that smile was fear, because I had stopped asking questions. I had stopped protesting. I had gone quiet. And silence to someone like her is the loudest threat of all. If you had proof that someone was slowly erasing your identity, would you act right away? Or wait for the perfect moment to drop your thoughts in the comments? I want to hear from people who've faced this kind of quiet betrayal and how you found the courage to fight back. I wasn't just collecting evidence now. I was building a timeline, a narrative, a case. And just as I was about to visit a lawyer, Lisa recommended a young woman in a pink suit showed up at the door. I thought she was a delivery person. But she wasn't. She was a notary. Hi, I'm here for a witness confirmation signature for Ms. Celine Reyes Calloway's power of attorney filing. You're listed as the witness of record. I blinked. I never signed anything. She held up the clipboard. There was my name, my forged signature. my role as a cooperative relative in long-term care. I stared at the ink, and I finally said it out loud. She's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. The woman stepped back. I, I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's not your fault, I said. But I need a copy of that form. Right now. She hesitated. And then, for reasons I still don't understand, she handed it to me. That's when I knew. Selene wasn't just trying to silence me. She was trying to legally erase me from existence. I wasn't always like this. I used to whisper before I spoke, apologize before I existed, grow smaller in every room so no one had to feel uncomfortable around me. That version of me died a long time ago. My name is Selene Reyes Calloway. I was born in a trailer off Route 12 in Sacramento County. My mother was a woman who could turn a compliment into an insult without blinking. She used to call me her second chance, but she treated me like a burden she never asked for. When I got a B on my report card, she'd say, "Well, I guess some people aren't meant to shine." When I got into college on scholarship, she didn't come to orientation, said she was letting me grow. What she meant was, go fail on your own. Just don't call me when you do. So I learned early that to survive, you had to become someone other people couldn't ignore. I met David my junior year. He was gentle, smart in a quiet way, the kind of man who didn't need to be seen to feel real. I loved him instantly, but I didn't love what came with him. His mother. Margaret had that particular kind of warmth that smothered everything else. She never raised her voice. But somehow every suggestion felt like an expectation. Every gift had a weight. Every smile, a boundary behind it. At first, I tried to please her. I let her take over the baby shower. I said thank you when she dropped off home-cooked meals that I never asked for. I moved into her house because David said it would just be until we get on our feet. But roots grow where you water them, and she had decades of watering this place. I was just another plant in her garden, trimmed to fit. So I created something she couldn't control. A voice. A space. A show that wasn't about screaming or fighting, but about claiming silence, redefining space. Challenging the idea that motherhood had to mean martyrdom. She hated it. Not out loud, of course. She'd just accidentally opened the studio door during a recording, or rearranged my merchandise inventory because she thought it looked cluttered. She'd ask things like, "Do you really need to monetize every feeling no?" Margaret. I don't need to. I choose to. She didn't understand. She thought she was the matriarch, the final voice. But I was building something that didn't need her blessing. And yes, I used her name on the licensing forms. Because she wouldn't sign the trust over unless she still felt useful. So I made her co-founder. A name on paper. It gave her the illusion of legacy, while giving me the legal structure I needed. I didn't erase her. I digitized her. I took a voice that had dominated this house for decades and turned it into ambient branding. People think power is about being loud. It's not. Power is being so woven into the system that even when you whisper, the whole room shifts. I know what people will say, that I should have sat down with her, had a heartfelt talk, apologized. But tell me this. When was the last time an empire was handed over with a hug? Have you ever watched someone weaponize their goodness to guilt you into silence? Do you believe someone's past pain justifies their present power? Let's open that up. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear every side, even the ones that make us uncomfortable. Because I didn't build the motherhood matrix for comfort. I built it for control. And Margaret, she's not going to stop poking around. I see the way she watches me now. quiet, calculated. But that's fine, because while she's digging for evidence, I've already started drafting the court petition. And this time, the paperwork won't need her signature. Her name was Camille. I hadn't seen her in almost a year. She used to walk her Pomeranian, Peaches, past our house every morning at 7 a.m., sharp like clockwork. But after Peaches passed and she moved to a smaller condo across town, our paths stopped crossing. Until one afternoon, just as I was coming back from the library, I spotted her sitting on the bench outside the old hardware store, flipping through a grocery circular and eating a warm pretzel. "Camille," I asked. She looked up, blinked twice, and then smiled wide. "Margaret. Oh my goodness, it's been forever. How are things?" I gave a half smile. "They're evolving." She laughed. That's one way to put it. We talked for a while about nothing, about everything. I didn't mention Celine, not at first, but Camille brought her up. I have to say, your daughter-in-law is impressive. I never understood what she did until recently. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I saw her last month at the Chamber of Commerce mixer." She continued. She gave a speech on digital legacy and building intergenerational wellness ecosystems. My stomach tightened. Camille went on. "She said her husband's mother, that would be you. I assume co-founded the business with her, but had stepped back due to declining mental clarity. Said you had left her a voice and a platform as a gift." I froze. What did she say? Exactly. Camille furrowed her brow, trying to remember. Something like, "Margaret told me she didn't want to be remembered as a woman clinging to her bedroom, but as a voice carried through mine." It was poetic. Everyone clapped. I was silent for a full minute. She didn't just erase me. She rewrote me beautifully, elegantly, so well that strangers applauded the fiction. Camille suddenly seemed hesitant. "I hope that's not... I mean, you're okay? Right?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. Thank you. That helps me more than you know." That night, I found the Chamber's website. They had uploaded the full video of Celine's keynote. There it was, her in a soft white blouse, lit like a saint, standing behind a mic with my name on the screen behind her in cursive font. She spoke about legacy, about healing the generational divide, about how her mother-in-law, Margaret Calloway, had entrusted her with the last chapter of her voice. And then, halfway through the video, I noticed something else. A man in the front row, a banker I recognized from years ago. When David and I had refinanced the house, he stood. He asked her a question. "Is the property fully under the brand's umbrella now, or still family-owned?" Celine answered, cool and confident. "Oh, the transition is complete. We filed the dissolution of co-ownership last quarter. It's fully ours." Dissolution. She had submitted documents terminating my stake in the trust forged. Of course, but accepted as valid in that setting. I paused the video, took screenshots, downloaded the file. I now had a public admission, on camera, delivered with pride and falsehood. The next morning, I showed it to Lisa. She took one look and said, "This changes everything." We printed it, time-stamped it, and sent it certified to the attorney Lisa had recommended, a woman named Marissa Graves, who specialized in elder fraud and civil identity manipulation. That same day, I walked to the studio door. Celine was recording. I knocked. She opened it, half distracted. "I'm living too," I said. "You'll want to pause." She looked irritated. Why I handed her a manila envelope. What's this? A copy of your own words, I said. She didn't open it right away. She didn't need to. She knew. She closed the door slowly. For the first time in months, she said nothing. I went back to my room. I sat down, and I felt something shift in the air. Not fear, not doubt. It was alignment. Sometimes, truth doesn't come from the people you plead with. It comes from someone passing by who didn't even know they were carrying the match that lit the fire. Have you ever been saved by a stranger's casual words, or had a secret uncovered not by confrontation, but by accident? Share it in the comments. You never know whose life your story might shake awake. I wasn't alone anymore. I had evidence, I had witnesses, and for the first time, I had nothing left to lose. The house was never louder than the day it went silent. It was a Sunday afternoon, the day Celine always hosted her weekly live stream from the home studio. She had branded it as the Sacred Session, a 90-minute event of guided discussion, emotional unburdening, and curated authenticity. Her viewers called it their weekly reset. I called it her stage, but this Sunday, I had a different plan. She started at noon, right on schedule, ring light on, headset charged. Her assistant, a girl barely old enough to drive, stood outside the door with a clipboard, preventing any interruptions. But this time, I wasn't going to knock. I walked straight into the living room in full view of the mounted cameras she used for promotional angles. I wore the same blue silk blouse I'd worn on my 40th anniversary, the one that still smelled faintly of rosewater. I stood in front of the camera, just off-center. Celine froze mid-sentence. I smiled at the lens. Hi, my name is Margaret Calloway. Some of you may know me as the energy that needed softening. Some of you have heard me referred to as legacy. And some of you might think I gave my blessing for this brand to exist. I didn't. Celine stood up. Mom, we're live. This isn't, I know exactly what this is. I interrupted. It's the truth, finally finding its voice. I reached into my bag and pulled out 3 folders. One for her, one for David, one for the camera. I read the first page aloud. Here is a notarized affidavit from the California Department of Business Oversight, stating that I never signed or consented to any entity known as the Motherhood Matrix. Here is a letter from Seed House Wellness Collective, confirming a falsified voiceover submission using cut-and-stitched audio from private family voicemails. And here, I paused, holding up a still image, is a clip from your Chamber of Commerce keynote, where you claimed I had stepped down due to declining mental capacity. On public record, the silence in the room was thunderous. Her assistant dropped her clipboard. David stood behind the camera, his mouth slightly open, eyes flicking from me to his wife. I continued, calm, unshaking. I spent the last 6 months being erased digitally, legally, emotionally. My identity was borrowed, my medical records tampered with, my own voice weaponized. Celine tried to interrupt. They won't believe you. I don't need them to believe me, I said. The proof is in their inboxes. Sent 15 minutes ago to every subscriber on your mailing list, including your sponsors. She paled. I turned to the audience, not the live stream, but David, my grandson, even the assistant. You watched this happen. Maybe you didn't mean to. Maybe you thought it was harmless. Maybe you thought it was healing. I looked back at Celine. But healing doesn't come from removing people who remember your beginning. She took a step forward. This is slander. No, I said, holding up the final folder. This is discovery, legal discovery. You'll want to give that to your lawyer. If you were standing in this room, if you had to choose, would you stay quiet? Or would you speak? Would you back the person with the brand? Or the one with the truth? Tell me in the comments. And be honest. Because this is the moment where silence becomes a decision. David spoke first. Not a sentence. Just my name. Mom. His voice cracked. He hadn't called me that in weeks. I nodded once. Slowly. I'm still here. Celine looked at me, eyes flickering with something I hadn't seen before. Not rage, not pity. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when a carefully crafted narrative starts to tear at the seams. I turned away. Calm. The house was silent again. But this time, not because they silenced me, because they finally had to listen. And what they didn't know was that the lawyer I had just retained was preparing to file charges under California's elder abuse statute. And that wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The letter from the law office of Graves and Lane arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was addressed to Ms. Celine R. Calloway and hand-delivered by a process server who didn't flinch when she slammed the door in his face. Inside the envelope were 4 items: a formal cease and desist for unauthorized use of identity, a subpoena for business documentation related to the motherhood matrix, a declaration of intent to pursue civil charges under California welfare and institutions, Code Paragraph 15610, Federal Elder Financial Abuse. A private cover letter signed by attorney Marissa Graves. That last one was short. Brutal. You built a business on her silence. We're giving her voice the legal amplification it deserves. David was silent when he read it. Celine. She laughed. Oh, please. This is theatre. She scoffed. There's no crime in rebranding a space. You can't sue someone for tone. But Marissa wasn't suing over tone. She was suing over fraud, identity theft, coercive control, and elder abuse. The first hearing was scheduled within 2 weeks. I didn't tell anyone I was attending in person. Celine arrived in a white blazer and heels too high for the courtroom's worn-out carpet. She brought a lawyer who looked like he'd graduated last Thursday and hadn't read her file until the elevator ride up. I came alone. But I wasn't alone. Marissa sat beside me, calm as glass. Lisa was in the back row, nodding encouragement. Even Camille came just to see how the story ends. She said with a wink. The judge, a sharp woman with iron-grey hair and eyes that didn't blink, read over the submitted materials with a kind of silence that made the whole courtroom shrink. Then she spoke. Ms. Calloway, she said, turning to Celine, do you acknowledge the signatures on these documents? Celine shifted. I don't recall signing them personally. That's not the question. The judge said, are they your signature or not? Her lawyer interjected. Your Honor. My client was under the impression that her mother-in-law had verbally consented to being declared legally incompetent on a power of attorney form. The judge cut in. While still paying taxes, driving, and receiving medical care independently, Celine's mouth opened, closed. Marissa stood. Your Honor, we have recorded voicemails submitted as audio evidence where the defendant discusses in detail her strategy for rebranding Ms. Calloway's presence, voice, and identity. In her own words, quote, we digitize her so she feels immortal, but keep her out of the day-to-day. Gasps echoed from the gallery. The judge turned to Celine. Do you deny saying that I was speaking metaphorically? The judge's eyes narrowed. We don't litigate metaphors. We litigate actions. Marissa stepped forward. Calm, Precise. Your Honor, under California's Elder Abuse Act, it is unlawful to isolate, financially manipulate, or impersonate a senior adult for gain. My client's name, voice, property, and identity were used without consent. This isn't branding. It's theft. The room went still. Then the judge leaned forward and said, slowly, deliberately, "If this is how you treat family, Ms. Calloway, I shudder to imagine how you treat strangers." Celine's face collapsed. For the first time, I saw her hands shake. The judge ordered a full audit of the Motherhood Matrix's assets and frozen all business activity pending the outcome. Celine was placed under temporary civil injunction, barring her from deleting, transferring, or altering any data, property, or legal materials associated with me. David approached me after court. His voice was hollow. "Mum, why didn't you tell me I looked at him?" "I did. You just weren't listening. If someone used your trust to stage your downfall, would you take them to court? Or try to forgive? Was this enough justice? Or should there have been more? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear what fairness looks like to you." I walked out of the courthouse alone, but I didn't feel alone. For the first time in months, the wind didn't bite. It moved with me. The house was still mine. The trust was being restored. The podcast would be suspended. The footage erased. The name cleared. But I didn't want to reclaim my bedroom anymore. I wanted something else. And I knew exactly where I'd begin. It took time. Even after the case was settled, after the cease and desist was enforced. The trust documents corrected. The podcast dismantled. It didn't happen overnight. The rooms were quiet again. But not in the way Selene had imagined. No ring lights, no mug inventory, no ambient affirmations echoing down the hall. Just light. Stillness. Real stillness. Selene moved out 2 months later. David stayed for a while. We didn't talk much in those first weeks. He seemed adrift, like someone realizing the map he'd been following had been drawn by someone else. Noah began tiptoeing into my room again. He started asking questions. "Grandma, did you used to live here all the time I still do?" "Sweetheart." I told him. "And so do you." It was early spring when I opened the old garage closet and pulled out a dusty cardboard box labeled M, Old Recipes. Inside were handwritten notes in my late husband's blocky print, clipped magazine clippings, and the peach cobbler formula I hadn't made since 2013. I started baking again. Then I started inviting people again. It began with just one neighbor. Then a friend from the senior center. Then Camille. Then 2 women I met at the courthouse who whispered, "We saw your case in the news. I think I'm going through the same thing." So I opened the house, not for Selene's version of curated conversation, but for real women, real tea, real stories. No branding, no episodes, just presence. We called it Wednesday mornings. That's all. Every week, no microphones, just legacy. Breathing freely. David asked once, quietly, if he could come. I said yes. He brought a pie. It was terrible, but it meant everything. Selene never apologized, and that's all right. Some people live their whole lives as mirrors, only reflecting what they want others to see, never revealing what's behind the glass. But me, I stopped living in someone else's frame. Last week, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I booked a train ticket, just me, northbound, no return date. I sent Lisa a postcard from the second stop. It said, Freedom isn't loud, it's just finally yours. Have you ever seen someone go from forgotten to unshakable? Someone who was written off only to return stronger than anyone expected? Tell us about them in the comments. Share their story. You never know who you'll inspire. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that are raw, real, and deeply human, hit that subscribe button. There are more voices waiting to be heard. And as for me, I'm not a voiceover. I'm not an aesthetic. I'm not a symbol. I'm Margaret Calloway. And I've never been quieter, but I've never had more power.